Welcome again, everybody. It's been quite some while since you've had an update on anything I'm working on. There have been some personal family stuff going on that I'm not going to touch on at this moment, that have slowed things down a bit, and just general stuff. But I have been doing a little bit more work on the Excel. As you know, if you've watched these videos before, this is a borrowed workspace, so I'm prioritising work on the card that is in the space that I do not have for an indefinite amount of time. So you'll notice there is a clear space down here, and that is because the chassis and most of the suspension bits have gone over to be very carefully sandblasted, only removing areas of galvanising that have actually failed and leaving all the good galvanising intact. And there have been some developments on the chassis side of things, which I'll talk about when the chassis comes back from being blasted, or at least I think I will. We'll see what develops on that front. So I'll take the camera off the stand and we'll have a little look at some of the bits I've been doing on the shell itself. So you can obviously see here I have the door removed, and this shows very clearly one of Lotus's innovations that they introduced with the Type 75 Elite in 1974, which is how they achieved, at the time, award-winning crash safety. The door itself is just a cosmetic shell, and the whole structure of the door is this side impact beam. And if I swing it out, you can see there's a very substantial hinge arrangement at the front, and the lock striker would actually bolt to the back of the beam, so you've got a direct structural connection between the latching mechanism and the hinge, and there is steel reinforcement on the underside of the fiberglass shell that makes that area very strong. So number of issues with these cars, which, I mean, this car is what, 37 years old. Rust in the window frames is an issue. This one mostly doesn't look too bad, apart from this top corner, but actually the bottom, where it bolts to the door beam, has completely rotted away in places. And often these door beams are completely rotten. This one is in fact very good, with just one small area around where it actually went through the door shell. So the door would have bolted up at the front to this angle bracket, and obviously you've got the foam helping to seal the hole in the front of the door, and there's just a little hole up here that will need fixing, but all the rest of it is actually pretty good. And I think this is the worst side of the car, the passenger side, which is the one side that obviously runs in the gutter, generally tends to be the worst side of the car. Well, my prediction that the driver's side would be better than the passenger side proved to be half right. As you can see, the door beam has got some fairly serious rust around the front area, particularly around the attachment point for the check strap, which of course gets stressed. And the door beam is of a slightly different design. On the passenger side there is a rib between these two threaded bosses, which is missing here, which would have given some reinforcement to the front boss. The paint finish is completely different. This appears to be just top coat over bare steel. The other side appears to be more like primer on the steel. So I'm wondering if one or other of these door beams has been replaced at some stage, quite possibly the passenger side. But I said I was only half right, and that's because the driver's side window frame, you can see a very stark contrast between the frame on the left, which was from the passenger side, and the driver's side on the right here. And this little piece of box section that forms an attachment point, well, it's this attachment point, and see the bottom is completely missing. The same is true of the middle, and see the remains of the rearmost attachment point, whereas they're all intact. That's all intact, and this little bit of corrosion down here seems to be the worst of it. But I think that this is in fact a replacement frame, because this piece of glass has been bonded in with silicone, whereas on the passenger side frame we have down here a piece of wire and a matching piece of wire here, and that's the heater element in the Solbit thermosetting adhesive that was used by Lotus in the factory to glue the quarter glass into the frame. I have new window frames. They're sitting in a big box over the back there. Now, another unique feature is bits of plywood, and this is obviously a very sad and sorry looking piece of plywood, and it comes just in here. I don't know if the lighting conditions will cooperate, but you can see there's a sort of fiberglass slot that it went into, and these form the primary crash structure of the front end. And many people throw up their hands in horror at the idea of using wood as a structural crash element. Replace the word wood with sustainably sourced cellulose high performance composite, and suddenly it doesn't sound so bad. You know, high performance military aircraft, i.e. de Havilland Mosquito, and racing boats have long been made of plywood. Used in the right way, it's a very high performing material, in some ways outperforming carbon fibre, except that it does rot, and Lotus didn't give it the highest levels of protection. This is really just paint, whereas if it had actually been encapsulated in polyester resin, it may in fact be still in good condition today. They are available as a ready-made replacement from Lotus bits, but the last time I visited they didn't have any immediately in stock, and in the meantime I have bought a piece of structural plywood and will be making my own. This is the panel from the driver's side of the car, and although it has rotted out at its lower edge, the rest of it is in actually very good condition, following the pattern of the passenger side being worse. driver's side is pretty good. You will notice it has a pair of holes in it, and therefore the air horn compressor. And despite the fact that replacement panels appear to be individually shaped, it's clear that on my car at least both panels were originally identical, because the passenger side panel has exactly those same compressor mounting holes. So what I shall be doing is using this panel to make a template which will recreate the lower edge, and then a nice sheet of plywood sitting over there from which I shall cut some new panels.